I say at my school, usually only black people get out of school suspension. I've never heard of white students getting out of school suspension from my experience. Yeah, I think it's just like because the black students have more people like being aggressive towards them, you know. The teachers and the administrative faculty are always like hanging over them, watching their every move, making sure all this stuff doesn't happen. And
okay, so this is something that I recently learned about, and my understanding of the school to prison pipeline is that certain schools punish African American, but not necessarily just African American, but minority students, students of color, very harshly with extreme punishments that lead them to leave school, and they're pretty much forced to kind of make it on their own in the streets, which eventually leads to them going to prison.
I understand the school to prison pipeline to mean a series of practices that are biased against students of color in particular, that result in greater disciplinary or more severe disciplinary procedures against students of color.
You know, when I think of the school to prison pipeline, I really think about the birth to prison pipeline. And I think about how racism is embedded in all of the systems in this country and operate in such a way that put men of color, specifically black men, but very much so today, women of color, black women, Latino men, Native American people in within the criminal justice system because of the breakdown of all the systems early on in their life. So our young people go to schools where they're disproportionately disciplined. They're taught a curriculum doesn't relate to their experience. They're taught lies from history that makes them not want to be in school and not want to excel in a Eurocentric curriculum or Eurocentric framework of education, and consequently, by not excelling within the school system, that opens them up to engagement with the criminal justice system. And we know that the criminal justice system disproportionately targets African Americans. So, for example, if you are black in Seattle, you are 10 times more likely to be stopped by the Seattle police than if you were white in Seattle. So that disproportionately puts you into contact with the criminal justice system. So the school to prison pipeline, or the birth to prison pipeline, really starts from prenatal care that a woman, a mother of color will receive, all the way up to mass incarceration and the policy of mass incarceration, which is really modern day slavery.
I've got dreams to remember. Many dreams.
The school to prison pipeline is a term used to describe the increasing patterns of contact students have with the juvenile and adult criminal justice systems as a result of practices implemented by educational institutions, which include zero-tolerance policies and the use of police in schools. The disciplinary policies and practices that create an environment for the school-to-prison link to occur disproportionately affect Latino and Black students, which is later reflected in the rates of incarceration. Between 1999 and 2007, the percentage of Black students being suspended has increased by 12%, while the percentage of white students being suspended has declined since the implementation of zero-tolerance policies. Nationally, students of color are suspended at 3 times the rate of their white counterparts. In 2011, in St. Louis City and County combined, students of color made up 48% of the public school system, but accounted for 80% of all out-of-school suspensions. White students made up 45% of the total student population, but accounted for only 15%.
One day, we're walking down the street. Joe Blow come up to you and grab you away from me. A dream that you just turned away.
So yes, I mean, without a doubt, disproportionately students of color at my school are ending up in school and out of school suspensions when compared with their white counterparts. There are times when I go to drop student work off in the ISS room, that's in school suspension, and every child in that room is a black child. That's not uncommon. That's just factual. Now, what accounts for that? I guess that's the million-dollar question. I tend to think that it has to do with how adults in the space read the behavior or interpret the behavior or make sense of the behavior of different kids. I think it has a lot to do with how the adults interpret the behavior of children. A white child might disagree with the teacher's decision and show that in a certain way that's read as acceptable. Whereas a child of color might have the exact same sentiment and express it differently. And that behavior is read to be more intentional. I think white teachers read on to the behavior of black children a certain intentionality that they don't for white students. In other words, a white student might do something and it's like, it's a mistake, or it's out of character, or that's not really how they are, or I think often, I mean, the same way, let me say it this way, the same way that in Cleveland, the two police officers roll up, and I say roll because the car was still in motion, roll up on a 14-year-old boy with a toy gun and think he's 20. They said they thought he was 20 years old. And to me, everybody says he was 14 years old. But the same way that those police officers viewed this child in the park, perhaps teachers view their students, right, as being older than they are. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Activities or problems or behaviors that are exhibited by both whites and blacks are treated differently at the very beginning. Like they don't, the whites who do the same thing as the black kids just are viewed differently. They aren't viewed as troublesome or as intimidating, perhaps, or as criminally minded, or what phrase always bothered me was sophisticated, streetwise sophisticated. That the black kids were always viewed to be more sophisticated in terms of street life than the white kids, and that's one of the factors in determining juvenile adjudications and consequences.
Also known as implicit social cognition, implicit bias refers to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. These biases, which encompass both favorable and unfavorable assessments, are activated involuntarily and without an individual's awareness or intentional control. Residing deep in the subconscious, these biases are different from known biases that individuals may choose to conceal for the purpose of social and/or political correctness. Rather, implicit biases are not accessible through introspection. The implicit associations we harbor in our subconscious cause us to have feelings and attitudes about other people based on characteristics such as race, ethnicity, age, and appearance. These associations develop over the course of a lifetime, beginning at a very early age, through exposure to direct and indirect messages. In addition to early life experiences, the media and news programming are often cited origins of implicit associations. Due to the negative way people of color are depicted by the media, it is easy for us to develop negative implicit biases towards black and brown people. Because of these implicit bias, teachers and administrators, just like police officers, are quicker to discipline children of color and for less serious offenses than their white classmates.
I'm gonna tell you a story about what happened to me and my friends. My class is like a majority of white kids and like some foreign exchange students. So we like the only black girls in the class, and we were all sitting in the back at the table. So the class, you know how when it's a sub, the class starts like acting up and everything. So at first he calls down the vice principal, so she gives us a warning. Then he calms down the principal, then she also gives us a warning. Then he calls down both of them, and then he points out our table, even though my table, our work was finished, done, and complete, and we already turned it in. And he points us out, and we have to go upstairs. So then the principal, who is a white male, he says, well, if you guys weren't talking so much and yelling, you wouldn't be in this mess, and I should just expel you right now, and that you wouldn't be getting after school detention. Even though my table, our work was complete first, and we were silent. We weren't in the ruckus going on in our classroom. So he issued out all of our detentions, right? So I calmly asked him to why do we have detentions if we didn't do anything? He's like, just be quiet and just do what you're told to do. So then I got really angry because I know I didn't do anything wrong, and I know my friends didn't do anything wrong. On the same day, two white boys, they got in a fight, but the school didn't do anything about it. They didn't suspend them, give them detentions. They just basically just sat them in an office and gave them verbal warnings and told them just to go their separate ways and not to do anything and don't mess with each other. And that really oppresses me because being a black female and just having my work done and just being called out of my class, pulling me out of my class and like depriving me basically of my education, it just makes me angry. Even though the two white kids were fighting and they didn't get any punishment whatsoever. There's a lot more stories that I could tell you.
My freshman year to the beginning of my sophomore year, everything was good, you know. Loved all my teachers. It was a community feel, just like how in the black community we all know each other, we all know each other's parents and families. It was all good, but normally had some problems with the accreditation, and we had a fight with that, with state, and we had to make a trip down to Jeff City, and to make a long story short, the accreditation was taken from us, and it was over like one little point. Like my junior year, everything was all good. We still took trips down to Jeff City, try to gain our accreditation and try to make a good name for ourselves. But everything kind of fell through. Going into my senior year, they cut half of the teachers and replaced them with teachers from I can't think of the program, but teachers from Teach for America. And remind you, this is a predominantly black school. Teachers also, like maybe one or two white teachers before the cuts. the cuts came, high and new, all white, and only three or four black teachers. We would make jokes and stuff. Like, we try to be nice with them, but you know, they'll kick us out, you know, suspend us. The black teachers would usually just say, you know, just calm that down, it's all good. The white teachers would flip out, go completely insane, call security in, write you up. You know, it was unnecessary. Everything that was going on was unnecessary. And towards the end of the year, with those teachers, they actually picked on pretty fast. So everything was all good, but it was a lot better when we had those teachers before. So, yeah.
So are there race differences in the way this happens?
Right,
and in fact, that clearly there were race differences in the same way that there are race differences in the way police respond to black kids. That African American children are much more likely to be suspended for school, expelled from school, disciplined in school for behaviors that if they were white children that wouldn't happen. We as a nation are failing a community. You know, we as a nation are failing a community. And we are failing the community because we don't think that they deserve something. And in the same way, the nation looks at those communities, often the people who have to work with them, whether it's teachers, staff, or others, don't have patience, don't have enough patience to make better decisions for them in terms of how they respond to them.
Can you repeat the first question? I'm going to address the
Okay,
first
all right, got you.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, so the first question is, are students of color, right, suspended at a higher rate than white students at your school or in the district overall?
Absolutely. So in my span of 15 years, what I have seen is, I'm going to give an example to talk about this. So teenagers, they tend to use drugs, marijuana recreationally. So this happens. So, and that's regardless of color. It's a thing that's, you know, people do.
Definitely.
So in the school district, what I have seen, I've seen this numbers of times where an African American student will be caught with marijuana. They'll be taken out of the school in handcuffs. If a Caucasian student is caught with marijuana, smoking marijuana, they're allowed to go to a drug treatment and get a lesser or no penalty for their situation. So that has happened a number of times, and that's bluntly unfair. That's bluntly unfair. I have never seen an African American student offered or entered into drug treatment as a precursor to a 10-day suspension with a hearing. I've never seen it happen. 15 years.
So I mean, why do you think that is? Why are folks giving different punishments?
I think it's just a mindset that African American students are more likely to get in trouble, so they're more targeted, and so they may have a higher rate of suspension before the incident occurred. So when something more serious occurs, then they get a stiffer penalty because they may have a lot of referrals, or they might have a lot of, you know, suspensions about little things. And those little things, when they go to a hearing, add up, and then they want to throw the book at the African Americans, where very few times, unless it's something extremely serious, have I seen white students really get suspended or written up.
Very first school where I taught, which was here in the St. Louis area, and I only taught there half a year, and then I got drafted and had to go off to Vietnam. But I had black kids then. That was my very first teaching experience. And there were two third grade boys, it was third grade class. And I know I was tougher on them than I was on some of those white farm kids. You know, I look back at it now, and I mean, I didn't mean to be unfair.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't matter. I was. You know, I liked the kids. But at the same time, I didn't treat them the same as the other kids. I believed in equality and all that, you know, but I didn't realize how I was not perceiving things the right way.
Mm-hmm.
That and so we're taught to be afraid of black men. We perceive black men as bigger, stronger, and meaner than white men that would be giving off the same, you know, be the same size and giving off the same signals would be perceived differently.
Mm-hmm.
It is just true. And I like to think that I've come along from that. But I'm still white, and I'm still a product of how I was raised, and I know that there are things inside of me that aren't as fair as I think they are.
White teachers might view white students as part of an in-group to which they belong, right? Like these are figuratively, a white child is my neighbor, right? And a black child is somebody else's neighbor, or even a stranger. I wonder to what extent there's this element at play in our subconscious, precisely in our subconscious, wherein we don't hold the success or failure of all students equally, depending on how they look, and how we look, and how we make sense of our relationship to our students.
Well, first I would say that internalized racial oppression is a multi-generational process that gets passed down in our families, which is our kind of the root place where we get our messages about the world, our value, our worth within the society. Then those messages are often reinforced, or not often, but are reinforced by the different institutions that we engage with every single day that tells us our worth, our place, and our value, that we internalize to a point we don't even think about it. It really lays in our subconscious mind, and we just conform to the norms of a race-constructed society. So people of color get messages every single day through the education system, from the media, about their worthlessness, their lack of value within the society, that we begin to internalize those messages. On the flip side, white people, those who come to be called white in relationship to people of color, get messages that reaffirm their intelligence, their being the most civilized people on the planet, and their inherent human worth. And we conform to those norms, and then we just go through society seeing communities of color that have been decimated across this country, and people think it's normal. We go through our world and see that white people own everything in our world. I mean, from every building, every company, the majority of everything in this country, and we accept that as normal. We accept going into a prison system in a state like Washington State that is only 2.5% African American, and if you go into the Washington State prison system, you would think you were in Nigeria in terms of how many black faces you would see, and we accept that as normal. So internalized oppression in many ways is the kind of thread that really holds structural racism in place, because it causes us to not see what's really in front of us. So working on and struggling with the dynamics of internalized oppression is a must for any educator that is working with children of color. If there's a white educator or an educator of color, we don't understand our internalized oppression and our internalized messages that we bring to the school, bring to the classroom, we will be doing more damage to children than helping children.
Well, I know my middle school, I had my sixth grade year, I had 5 black teachers. But after they cut the music and art program, because they said they wanted us to improve on test scores, and extracurriculum activities were just like a waste of time. They said it was a waste of time, which to me was silly. Then they cut us down to just 2 African American teachers. We did have some teachers who you could definitely tell were prejudiced. They didn't have to say it, but you could feel it. Some of their comments towards black students. One comment which I will never forget. We had one teacher who told a student, "If you keep acting up in my class, I'm gonna call your mother down at Target." Now, no one else probably thought anything about it, but to me, I just felt like she could have said, "If you keep acting, I'm going to call your mother." Her bringing up where his mother worked, to me, was unnecessary, but I also feel like she was downing where she worked.
Mm-hmm.
Like, "Oh, I'm going to call your mother down at Target," like degrading his mother in a sense. Her name was, I can't remember her first name, but it used to be Miss McCullough before she got married. And her father was the prosecuting attorney. And I remember she used to always tell us that, "Oh, I come from a good family. My father's a prosecuting attorney." She used to always bring that up. And a personal story from having her as a teacher, when we used to have discussions about what high schools we wanted to go to, I told her I wanted to go to a private school called John Burroughs. And I know it was pretty expensive, but I had family support who was willing to help, plus financial aid. But her comments when I told her that I wanted to go to that school was, "Why do you want to go to that school?" And before I could even explain myself, she started saying, "I went to private schools. You wouldn't make it in a private school. Private schools are way harder than public schools," and basically tried to make me change my mind. When she said that, I believed her. When she said that I wouldn't make it, I believed her. I gave up hope, but we had already started the process, so I just kept on going. And I was thinking as we were going that if I make it, then I'll make it, but if I don't, then it's all right. Mm-hmm. Not because of my... Honestly, at first, if I didn't make it, I would have been extremely upset, but, her telling me that I wasn't going to make it, in a sense, kind of prepared me to not be upset when I got let down.
To accept that I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
You're growing up through school all your life. All these teachers are giving you this message like you always creating trouble. It's always all these black students, black people are always creating trouble. Then you start to think like, maybe I'm supposed to create trouble. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. And sometimes I feel like students fall into that. They're like really giving up and they're like letting it happen to themselves. They're giving into the stereotype of black kids getting into trouble all the time.
Right. So, how are you doing today?
Well, I had a good day.
Doing all right?
Yeah.
That's good. What is your name?
Akeem Webb.
Akeem Webb. And what school do you go to, Akeem?
Northwest Academy of Law.
Yeah, what's your name, bro?
I'm Kenny Watts.
Kenny Watts. And your St. Louis native?
Yes.
Okay. What high school do you go to?
Oh, it's a Normandy. It's a Normandy High School.
Right.
Hi, my name is Ronnie Zimmerman. I go to Hague Middle School in St. Anne, Missouri, and
What?
I'm 13.
What school district is that?
It's Rittner School District.
What's your whole name? Your full name?
Mancari Rollins,
How old are you?
15,
And what school you go to?
Branson Arts Academy.
My name is Darlene Donegan, and I am a history teacher for a local school district in the St. Louis County area. I've been in education for 15 years.
My name is Lynn Roos, or Geraldine is my full name, but Lynn Roos. I have been a public defender for 20 years. I just recently left the PDs in the beginning of July to go into private practice.
My name is Evan. My students call me Mr. Smith. I've been teaching now for 8 years. I'll be starting my 9th year in the fall.
So to start, I guess if you could just tell us your name, please.
Charles Smith. I go by Chuck.
Charles Smith.
Okay, I'm a retired elementary and middle school teacher. I had an emphasis on teaching math, but I taught all subjects at one time or another. Retired after 29 years teaching here in Missouri.
My name is Norm White. I'm a criminology professor at St. Louis University. I'm an associate professor. I'm also the associate dean for community engagement and community partnerships. The last thing I guess I should say is that I'm the primary investigator on a project called Shut It Down, Closing the School-to-Prison Pipeline.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Dustin Washington, and I'm an anti-racist educator and community organizer. Specifically, I'm the director of the Community Justice Program with the American Friends Service Committee, and I'm also a core trainer with the People's Institute for Survival Beyond.